pop on. Okay, Mark, thanks very much for coming on to the podcast.
Happy to be here, man.
Yeah, great to get to talk to you. So you're the man behind the certified personnel memes page.
I am. Admin reveal, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think you didn't reveal your face for a long time from what I could tell, right?
No, not really. I think I was kind of having fun with like people thinking I was like, I don't know, just a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Like I had, I was receiving DMs.
Aaron Horschig's ghost page.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where he goes to vent his real opinions on things.
Yeah, exactly. No, but people like, they thought I was like Jordan Feigenbaum. They thought I was all kinds of, Greg Knuckles at one point, which kind of didn't even make sense. But like I had gotten so like, I don't know, it was just kind of like fun to play that mystery role. Like, I don't know, just like let them think whoever they want to, that I am whoever they want to think that I am.
Yeah, that's kind of more fun, really.
It was, but then like, I don't know, it started to be like, they thought I was like, I'm just a personal trainer and a coach. And it started, I was getting all these like physio questions and like just questions that were way out of my scope of practice, scope of knowledge. And it was like, okay, I think I have to like, I'm just this powerlifting coach, guys. I'm just this like personal trainer, but there weren't any like lulls and follows or people just, still wanted to hear what I had to say. And I don't know, just you need to amass this following over time,
Yeah. So I just want to get an idea of, so you say you work as a coach, obviously. So how did the whole kind of lifting, entrance to the lifting world actually start for you then? And then how did that end up with you becoming a coach?
Yeah. So it's funny because the way I read your question, I thought about the answer as almost if it's like the opposite.
Yeah.
When I got into training, even myself, when I like got into fitness, I did like distance running for the most part, I would like clock mileage and that was like my big thing, I was like a runner, and then I started to like slowly get more into strength training, but it was more like the functional training.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I had worked at like a big box gym and everybody was doing like that functional type stuff. So I was like surrounded by that environment. And then like I had slowly got like further into that. I got my FMS certification in 2017. And so I was like deep into that rabbit hole.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but had you always saw yourself as getting into fitness, or what age were you when you started running?
So I was probably like mid 20s then.
Okay, so you're kind of late.
I don't know if you know, because I don't know if you know or not, but I was in that car accident that I've talked a lot lot at 17.
Oh, I didn't. You did tell me that you had like a load of injuries.
So I broke both my femurs in a car accident when I was 17.
Jesus.
Just a long hospital stay.
Was that 10 out of 10 pain scale?
Probably beyond. It was pretty brutal. And the lengthy hospital stay and the rehabilitation and I did inpatient rehabilitation for 3 to 4 weeks to learn to like relearn to train my gait and learn how to walk again. And even when I left the inpatient, I was still on crutches and I had to do outpatient for and then I ended up a year later, I actually had a lot of pain for about a year, not to like drag the story out, but I ended up getting a second surgery because I went with a consult with an ortho. Like a year later, I got an x-ray and it turns out, because I had 2 metal rods inserted in both femurs. So it turns out that the left bone didn't heal around the rod as it, I guess, was supposed to. So there was like this big spacing between. So I did a graft of my hip, my pelvis rather, and they inserted it into the spacing in the femur, and then I had to go through rehabilitation again. And it was just like many years of ups and downs with that stuff. And I guess once I started to, I don't know, feel like myself again, I guess I could say, like, that's when I started to get more into like physical activity because, I was down and out, you know what I mean? So I started to get into physical activity and I didn't really know what to do. So I did, I looked up stuff online and I figured, you know, like, I don't know, like run, you know, like I almost envisioned myself as like Rocky, you know, with like, he was like, you know, the underdog. He'd put on his tracksuit and he would go, you know, just jog around Philly. And like, not that I did that type of stuff, but like, and not that I boxed, but it was just, I don't know, like, you know, you have the Eye of the Tiger playing and you're like, I'm going to get back in shape and, you know, have that kind of
frozen pig carcasses.
I know, I should have asked if they would let me in the butcher shop, the local butcher shop, but you know what I mean? But no, so, and then I started to get like more into weight training and going to the gym. And how I got into personal training was I actually met some personal trainers at the local gym, and they put me through like a fitness evaluation, and like I let them talk me into this whole thing.
Right.
And it's so funny because like thinking back on it now, they made me do all this like random functional stuff that like had nothing to do with my goals that I told them, you know, about. It was like, you know, do this weird plank exercise where you like lift your arm, and like it's like hard to even remember the exercise, but they were just like meant to challenge you in odd ways that they knew would challenge you because they just gave the exercises up, you know. It's like an FMS screen. It's like nobody practices inline lunges with a dowel behind their back, so like why are they going to be good at it during the screen? You know what I mean? Unless you're like, you have just amazing body awareness and you're a natural athlete and you're like, oh, okay. But you take the average person and you put them through, you know what I mean? Like they're just not good at those things, because why would they be? So like I had that experience. And then, I don't know, it was like, it just kind of changed my whole outlook, I guess, on fitness and like how to train. And it was like, still so like silly. But I ended up getting into personal training that way. And that's kind of how I went down that whole functional rabbit hole, because I just like fell in love with, I don't know, like all these, like the Thomas Myers, and like, I started to like read up on, you know, like you wanted to talk about like the kinesiopathic model, like those types of movement models, the functional movement system, and all that type of stuff. Like I went all in. I was like, this is amazing. And like, you know, I'm going to learn, I'm going to become the most knowledgeable personal trainer that exists. You know what I mean? And like, so I went down that rabbit hole for a while, and that's mainly how I trained clients. And, you know, we did, like I said, I got FMS certified, and I started doing some FMS screens. I was checking people's joint, like measuring people's joint range of motion with like a goniometer, like in the basement of like a Boston sports club. Like it was the most ridiculous scene. Like if I had like, it's funny to like think back, you know, maybe as like a third party perspective and like watch the whole scene play out. Like I would be sitting there just like shaking my head. Like, you know what I mean?
3 degrees discrepancy in your shoulder flexion. You're not benching today.
Basically, I was like, dude, I was the worst offender, you know, just the worst offender, like the people that we vehemently make fun of, you know what I mean? Like,
and so what really interests me here, because it kind of feeds my my understanding of like how people will actually end up changing their minds on this stuff, is I'd be interested to know, what was the point then where you started questioning it, or was there somebody who broached the topic to you in a certain way that made you think differently, or like what was the point where you thought like maybe this is actual bullshit?
So there was like a pivotal moment, and there was there was actually a few people involved. So I was dating this girl at the time who I worked with at the gym. She was also a personal trainer, and she wanted to get into powerlifting. And another trainer that I knew at the gym went to like this powerlifting gym. He knew this coach, and so I was like, okay, like there's a connection there. Like I can make an introduction and get her into powerlifting. So I set up the appointment, I guess, and we went and met the coach at the gym, and so he was like asked us both to train with him, you know, and I was like, okay, you know, like at the time, at that point, like I was strength training, I guess. Like I was squatting high, you know, like I had squatted like 315 for a triple, like a 3 RM that was probably like 6 inches high.
Seedman depth.
Yeah, basically. Or even higher, probably, if I'm being honest. But I was like, you know what, like this seems cool, you know, like because I was getting more into that type of training, I guess, and like doing more like body build, like more dumbbell work. Like I was getting more into like getting stronger and getting bigger. I had left the whole like cardio, you know, like more endurance-based training kind of paradigm behind, and I was doing more like, you know, strength type stuff. So I was like, all right, it'll be cool to go like meet a real strength coach and like, you know, do some training with them. And so he asked us to train with him. And I remember we started warming, like I did like 15 minutes of foam rolling and like a whole, Spider-Man lunge with the rotation routine. Like he was probably looking at me like this, so, we start getting warmed up, we get under the bar and he's yelling at me about the depth, right? He's like, squat lower, squat lower, squat lower. And like, we just kept working up. And I remember I got literally buried by a 245 pounds. So that's what, 110 kilo.
110 kilos,
110 kilo squat. And I remember one of the females, she was like a 63 kilo lifter. She was really good. She came over and like helped me up like with ease.
My pride.
And I was just like beyond embarrassed, you know what I mean? Beyond mortified. Like, did this really just happen?
Yeah.
So then like I ended up having a good conversation with the coach, and like my girlfriend at the time, she ended up hiring him. And when we left the gym, she asked me, she's like, why don't you do this with me? Hire him as a coach and just kind of like go in. And I'm like, you know what? Why not? So like, I texted him immediately and I was like, hey, I'm going to do it as well. So like, I paid him, he sent me the program. And at that, this was pre-COVID. This was like early 2018. So like he had a whole in-person group at this strength training gym, so it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go. You come 4 days a week and he's there and, he coaches you up and he, helps you make decisions or whatever, he's just there. So I proceeded to do that for a while. We ran like basically, so it was interesting. His coach at the time was Shiko, because Shiko did like a US tour, and the gym that he worked at, not the one that we trained at, but a gym he had previously worked for, he did the seminar there.
Right.
And they kind of like hit it off, and like, he just was really interested in like everything for Shiko, so he hired him as the coach, and he was like, teach me powerlifting. So basically everything that we did like as a group in the gym was like a Shiko program.
Yeah. Lovely guy, by the way. I met him at a seminar here.
Oh, Shiko. Oh yeah, that's right. I saw the picture with you guys. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. I feel like I'm way off on a tangent at this point.
Well, I think we were trying
how did I change my perspective? That's where we were. Okay. So I hired my former coach, and we started to have a lot of, because I was a personal trainer, so we started to talk a lot about training and coaching people and training people, and like, I would always like, it was funny because like I would always parallel what he did to what I did. I could always tell that he just like didn't like that, like it was like, it's not the same thing, but he taught me a lot. Like he introduced me. I remember I came in one day and he was like talking about like systematic reviews with meta-analysis. And I like didn't even like, I was like, those words are familiar, but what is that? Like, what is that? And he's actually sent me the Greg Lehman article, the Reconciling Spinal Flexion and Pain.
Yeah.
You're doomed to failure, or perhaps it doesn't matter, whatever the long ass title is. Yeah. And I remember I was like, okay, cool, I'll read that later, And I remember going home and like opening that article up and just like, I was in awe, like I was in shock. Like I was like, what is all of this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was like the study that looked at the neutral spine, and I was like, all these studies on like the exercise that I love, kettlebell swings, the functional exercise, and I'm teaching everybody this like neutral spine, and I'm, the way that I picture the spine moving is much different than what these scientific studies say how the spine moves, and I'm just like kind of taken aback by the whole thing. And I don't know, I guess at the time, I guess I just like at least had the awareness to know that like I'm not smarter than what this article says. And it was just kind of like
every time I read a Greg Lehman article, to be honest.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I just had this like kind of like pivotal paradigm shift in my head. Like I was like, everything just started changing. And I kind of, it wasn't like an automatic like shift like immediately, but it was,
it opened.
I started to like, I would go to work and I would start to notice these things that they talked about in the articles, and through, Lehman, I kind of found a ton of other people. I remember I found like Clinical Athlete, Quinn Hennick, and I would start listening to their podcasts, and they, would talk about similar things. And I was like, I kind of just started to get introduced to this whole evidence-based community. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, and they have this entirely different perspective, like almost this completely opposing perspective as I have, or I had, or what I have is starting to move more towards what they think, and I guess that was sort of like the pivotal moment. And that's how my meme page was born, because every day I would go to work and then I would see the other trainers like trying to fix people's posture, and then I
isn't it?
Yeah, and I started to think about all the stuff that I'm reading and learning, and I'm like, no, like no, you're not, and and then they're like, I see it just all starts to become so clear, them using it as a buy-in tool, them using it to sell their training packages, and putting fear into these people. And that was one thing that was huge with me that I started to notice. I was like, you're legitimately scaring people into buying training sessions from you, because you've it's in the, you've created this perceived, panacea to their problem. It's like, you have an issue, a made up issue, and I have the solution. And if you don't want to get hurt, and if, yada, 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 right? Insert silly BS narrative, please buy my personal training.
Very effective marketing.
It's extremely effective. And I just started to get angrier and angrier with it. I would get mad that people were literally getting duped into just buying training based on fear, based on them scared they were going to get hurt, or they were going to do something wrong, or they, and then it's all the implications from there, which goes into the movement model, right? Where it's you put them through the FMS, right? And their knee caves a little bit on the inline lunge. So then you got to do banded, in the split 90-90 split squat stance with a band pulling from, a horizontal thing, so it's so they can work on their hips or whatever, it's just it's the most, thinking about it now, even, whoa, shit.
No good.
Oh, yeah, I thought I lost you.
No, we're still here.
Oh, never mind. Something popped up. And
you're getting ads on Zoom?
Yeah, look, how the heck do I get this back to full screen though? Damn, I was on a roll too.
If you're on a Mac, hit F3, it'll show you all the different screens.
It's fine. I can see. It's
okay. But that is interesting though, because I struggle now. No, I think it's important for people to hear how you traverse that, because maybe there's somebody who's listening who might still be in that kind of functional paradigm. It's interesting for myself, because I was never as bought in as what you're describing with the whole FMS stuff or whatever. I was lucky in that the way I was introduced to training was really solid, very kind of CrossFit-y, and there's not I wouldn't do all the stuff the same way again, but I never got completely suckered into the functional stuff. But there was an aspect of it definitely there. And I think that for me at the time, and I think a lot of the people who practice that, I don't think I'd be as cynical as to say that the majority of them are aware that this is going to be a really good marketing tactic and I'm going to scare people into staying around. It actually almost feels like you're being more professional when you're in that paradigm, because you feel like I'm the person who cares about actually keeping these people safe and stopping them from getting hurt, and everybody else is just reckless and loading too much weight on the bar, and they don't care about form. And it's when you present somebody with the evidence that actually, you're just basing this off some guy that you're following on Twitter, or a person who was a lecturer in your PT course or whatever. And if you actually went away and looked at the research, you'd see that this has just been parroted around for years without any actual solid evidence for it.
Yeah,
it's when people go past that point where they've seen the evidence and now they're saying, oh, but that's not proper science because I've got experience and that's better than science. And that's the point when I start saying, okay, you actually are an asshole who's out to just make money because you've realized that this is more profitable.
Yeah.
Or you're too proud to admit that you were wrong for years, which we both have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there's a good mix of both of those, or all, a good variation of all that, out there, whereas athletes, for example, Jeff Cavalier, at this point, he's just blatantly ignoring any evidence that, will kind of put a damper on his whole business. You know what I mean? Because he can't, like, look how polarizing he is. You know, he can't come out and say, like, did you see the new post he put out about one-arm dumbbell rows? How, you know, it can increase your risk of a hernia because of because your knee on the bench is like, you know, your femur's abducted. So like it puts stress on the groin. It was like the most ridiculous, like, where do you even come up with this stuff? You know, so like someone like that will hurt his whole business model. If
like,
he, you know.
Yeah. I can imagine the thumbnail, never do dumbbell rows again.
It's so ridiculous.
It's interesting. I wonder if like somebody like that could, I mean, I have great admiration for the barbell medicine guys, because I know they used to be associated with starting strength and used to have a very different take on not injury and pain, and well, maybe to a certain degree, but certainly training and stuff like that. And they've actually, you know, had the balls to turn around and say, actually, we were wrong. We weren't as aware of the evidence as we should have been, and this is the better way to do it. Maybe somebody who's doing stuff so comically wrong and built a business model on it like AthleanX couldn't just take all of those people and say that, like, this is all complete bullshit.
Yeah. You know, but it's interesting. So I feel like someone like Squat U, though, could still sort of employ like the same type of approach that he does, but he could just use a different narrative.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, because I feel like someone like AthleanX, like, he's way too far gone. Like, with he makes, not that Aaron doesn't make polarizing statements as well, but like the stuff that, you know, Jeff comes up with are just like way out in left field. But it's like with Squat U, it's like he comes so close to the mark sometimes, and then just you know, and it's like, if you just like kind of changed up your narrative a little bit and like didn't ignore the contradictory evidence that exists, you know, that challenges the things that you say, you can kind of just twist everything and like just change it, you know, make a few tweaks here and there to the language that you use, and all would be fine, you know, and then you'd probably help a lot more people than you do.
Yeah. And I find that we were talking before this started about like getting angry DMs over the memes that we make. And I find that I get that like really black and white approach to issues, like say like the Squat U thing, where somebody will message me and say, oh, well, you're saying his stuff doesn't work because I tried it and it worked. And I'm saying, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works for some people, but not for the reasons that he's saying. Like there's a difference between saying that your knee pain on squats got better because I got you to do one-legged pistol squats for 4 weeks. There's a difference between saying that and saying that it was because you corrected some asymmetry, and saying, well, we just changed the movement and we reduced the load a little bit for a few weeks and then you built back up to what you were doing. Because one narrative is you're broken, and if you don't do things my way, you're going to be fucked. And the other narrative is that actually it's a pretty generalized healing process that your body can do in lots of different ways.
And I think people who actually do stay up to date with the evidence have a more they understand that that's kind of how things happen, right? Like regression to the mean. Like no matter what intervention you employ, as long as you're not making the situation worse, like the person is going to get better on its own, on his or her own, right? Just based on like the natural history of like how these things work. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, it's like you said, like, all right, we'll just reduce the load for a little while, maybe alter the movement a little bit so that, you know, you're not as sensitive to it. And then, you know, we'll start to build back up in a few weeks once you feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But it's like people just want to take credit for all of the interventions that they employ, you know, like the one-leg pistol squat, or like, you know, this ankle mobility drill, or this, the thing that I did, the intervention that I employed is the thing that got you better, you know, and they can't just like accept that it's just the body's healing itself on its own. As long as you kind of manage the loads appropriately, it's just the natural occurrence that's going to happen, you know.
And it's like you said earlier, like, I mean, that's not as easy as saying, you know, you have a significant problem that only I can fix. It's not as easy to market the more generalized approach that maybe doesn't make the physiotherapist or the coach as important as they'd like to be. Just touching back on, you know, we were talking about the meme page there. Just tell me about, so that started from your, you know, frustrations at seeing people. That was not so ethical. And I'm the same. Like, I actually the thing that I really like about making memes is that it's a great outlet where when like I could see myself getting into an argument with somebody, I can just go away and make a meme instead. And but
kind of how it started,
yeah, and obviously that pisses off a lot of people, and it's part of the whole nature of the game. But so how did that grow then? You said you started posting memes back in 2018 when you started the page?
So actually probably this coincides with my start into powerlifting, right? Because once I got into powerlifting, I got introduced to the evidence-based community, and I started to research, and I started to get more well versed in just in the literature in general. And I guess so probably within 6 to 8 months, not even, like I started to I couldn't take it anymore, and like memes were kind of starting to be a popular thing. So I was like, I'm just going to make this meme page because I just thought they were fun and creative, and like, I could get creative and they were fun to make. And so I just started posting, and because of like my connections to the evidence-based community, a lot of people started following me like right away. Like probably one of my first 500 follows was like, the whole barbell medicine crew started following me.
Nice.
Because I knew one of the guys personally, because he lived in Boston, worked in Boston, and like we trained together. So I like had a connection through him. And I knew some other like evidence-based physios within the local community. So like they started following me, they started like sharing my stuff. So like, that kind of snowballed, and I started to get more follows, and like, it just kind of became more fun. I was like, wow, people like this stuff. And like, people think it's interesting. And like, it started off more so as like, me getting my frustrations out, but it was more for like coaches, clinicians, not like, the average lifter. I kind of like, now I feel like I do make I kind of split it between, coaches, clinicians, they'll understand a lot of the stuff, but then I do want to target like lifters and people who like don't really lay people, I guess you could say, who don't really understand like the science and stuff like that, where I want them to kind of come into the fold as well, like make memes for everybody, I guess.
Can I just say, like, I mean, I discovered your page, I think maybe in 2020 or 2021, and I think a big reason that a lot of people are drawn to it is probably because gym and fitness memes in general are pretty shit in terms of like what the big pages tend to post, and it's
just like, very like they're just very like generic.
Yeah, it's always just like, oh, legs are sore after leg day, can't walk up the stairs type shit, or like haha trend, and like just like these really overdone memes. People taking too much pre-workout before the gym and stuff like that. And then when you combine like actually like a good sense of humor on memes with something that's like quite niche, like that evidence-based community that didn't really have any kind of stuff like that. I think that's a big reason why, pages like yours and functional memology and no bullshit physio and pages like that, I've gotten traction because it was actually adding something different that you weren't going to see on like Gym Fail Nation or whatever the hell it's called. Or
exactly. Exactly. And I think it allowed for other, like evidence-based practitioners to engage in the fun and be like, they could relate to all the memes, they could relate to these frustrations, and so it was like cool, because you get engagement, people comment, and like they'll share your stuff, and then it just kind of, like I said, like it snowballs, and it, it just grows larger and grows larger. And it's been really cool to see,
and it's an educational tool as well. I mean, I was saying to you before we started that I posted on Instagram for 5 or 6 years, and it was a combination of like just like purely positive educational upbeat posts, just like charts and infographics and stuff like that, or a video of me talking, and like it just didn't get that much traction. And I think it's because Instagram is already so saturated with people doing that, and it wants to reward pretty low attention span.
Like you're just throwing buckets of water into the ocean, basically.
I mean, like, I don't blame the average person for seeing a video of some guy talking about protein pop up that's going to be like 5 minutes long, and they're like, I've seen 3 or 4 of these today, and I'm probably going to go with the one that's got the best production content that Lane Norton put up or something, So, and it's crazy, like how much more traction I got when I started posting memes, and I realized that they actually could be a pretty good way of educating people on topics, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but there's something really potent about like the immediacy that you can communicate a message with the meme. Like you only look at it for 2 or 3 seconds, but like it just communicates something way faster than like a big infographic, you know? And then if you want more detail, you can go into the caption or go into, say, like a more long form thing like this, you know?
Yeah. Because it's interesting when you take like an image that everybody it's like I don't even know. It's so hard to put it into words. You know what I mean? Like an image that captures like a certain emotion, that like you could place certain words that like that are just relatable to a certain niche. And like, I don't know. But I totally understand what you're saying. I'm having trouble putting it into words myself. Like, you just stare at it for 2 seconds and it just makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, so there's something to be said for that. Like, if you can see that and it draws you in and you're like, it just makes perfect sense to you. And then you can, this is where Alexi and functional memology, they've really stepped up their game, like where they're doing multiple slide posts with context and citations and all this. Cause like for me, like, I was like, damn, like, do I gotta do this stuff now? Like I was like,
so much more effort.
A shit post and put a funny caption and like everybody likes it. But like, that's where like the educational stuff can come in, because it's like you can draw people in through the meme because it's relatable, it makes sense to them, and then it's like, okay, I can actually learn more about the subject matter, or this nuanced part of it, or whatever the case may be. So it's like, in functional memology, put up a post the other day where it's like, the person that was mad, it's like, you can't be a meme page and an education.
I love that one. Yeah.
You have to choose, and I had just recently put up a post about like the differences between like high bar and low bar, and just like being able to use that as like a strategy to as like a load management strategy, right? Like training. And so it was perfect, where it was like, okay, I can definitely be both, because there were times where I was like, no, like this page is strictly for memes and shit posting and like for me to get my frustrations out. But as it's grown, and like it's grown so much more than like even my personal page or my collaborative strength business page. Because I used to do the same thing. Like on my personal page, I would post a bunch of stuff. Like if you scroll way back, like I have a ton of like even like silly stuff, like diaphragmatic breathing posts, and like try this conditioning circuit, or like just a ton of different like strength training and general strength training information. And like that never really gained much traction, and then it was like the meme page blew up. So now I'm like, I can use that, right? Like as a tool, and just, like I did that post and I collaborated with my own business page, when it did probably way better than it would if I had only posted it on the collab strength page.
Definitely.
So I think it's a great way to just get good, solid, like evidence-based information out there. You know what I mean? And like, and good and practical information too, not just like, oh, this is what this study says, or this is how this mechanism may work, or like, but here's a bunch of, here's what the evidence says about this subject matter. Here's how, like, my interpretation of the science, and here's how you can apply it in your own training, type of thing. You know what I mean? And you could capture it with a meme, and to draw people in and get interested in what I have to say about, whether it's just a basic, scientific fact, or a citation, or whatever, or it's my opinion or my interpretation of that.
Yeah. And
I think.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No, I was pretty much done.
No, I was gonna say, so you're up over you're well over 10,000 followers now, right?
Yeah, I just hit 15K like yesterday.
Okay, congrats. So is there a post that you can remember that like got like the most attention, or whether you're measuring it by likes or engagements or whatever?
So like there were the first few posts I did were actually really well received, and they got a lot of likes. I remember the very first one was like the Morpheus
the blue pill, red pill.
No, it was like what if I told you?
Oh yeah.
And it was like, what if I told you by using dysfunction as a buy-in tool, you're creating the dysfunction?
Yeah.
and like almost like this like paradoxical like mind fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And like people, and then like that one did really well. And then I feel like I couldn't top that one for a little while.
Yeah.
But then I think the first meme that really got, maybe, 300, 400, 500 likes was like the SpongeBob, the one where I forget but it's like the like the monster, he's like coming out, and like there's one SpongeBob that's like super scared, and the other SpongeBob is like kind of like,
oh, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
And so it was like the scared SpongeBob was, so like the monster was like pain,
yeah,
right, and the scared SpongeBob was like like a person who is like has all these like is working under the framework of like the kinesiopathic model.
Yeah.
Whereas the nonchalant, like, what's the problem SpongeBob is like, he has a grasp on pain science.
Yeah.
Right. So he's not like scared of the pain, whereas like this person who just has these like these like outdated beliefs about pain, that it's damaging and yada yada, right? They're like, they feel any sensation in their body and they're scared about it. You know what I mean? Because it means something bad. It's alarming. It's, I have to go get this checked out. I need an MRI. There's some sort of, dysfunction, or some sort of like, I'm broken in some
structural damage of some sort.
Structural damage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So, and that one probably got a shitload of shares because that brought in a ton of people. And that's kind of that's when I started making more memes about pain too. And I was kind of like, I went down like, that's like totally out of my scope, but I just went down the rabbit hole anyways, because I was like, this shit is super interesting.
It is. It really is.
Like, but it's like even as a personal trainer, like everybody comes in, like if you're human, you experience pain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you work with humans and their bodies in some capacity, you should have some grasp on the science of it, because especially like when you're applying stress to the body, like that's literally your job. Is to apply stress and mechanical tension and to manage the loads appropriately to keep people healthy, but keep people progressing, right? And it's like at some point something's going to hurt, because you're not a magician and you can't see into the future, so you really don't know if your dosing is appropriate. And the only time it isn't is when they come to you and say something's kind of fucked up. It's like, my elbow's been bothering me for 3 days, and I'm like, or my knee, or my whatever, you know what I mean? That's just like, it's not like an alarming thing. It's just like, okay, like we've kind of like hit that wall where we're probably going to need to dial it back a little bit. And that's probably going to allow us to find more of a sweet spot anyways. You know? So it's like, it's not a bad thing. You can really help it, like, especially if it's just some niggle or some, nagging, like, as long as you're not like, some catastrophic injury in the gym, which usually doesn't happen. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, my knee's kind of been bothering me for a few days. It's like, okay, that's actually helpful information. It lets me know that like, at least you're training hard enough to the point where like something's starting to hurt a little bit. And it's like, now we can just adjust the dosing and probably find a good sweet spot for you. That's kind of the way I think about that.
Yeah. And the pain one, like it's, talking about pain and injury, and giving advice on that, like it's something that I struggle with a lot, because I always want to be, very sure to be operating within my scope. But at the same time, it's very difficult when you see people who are supposedly meant to be the designated professionals in that area, like say physiotherapists and stuff like that, who just don't have a notion about any of the literature on pain and injury, and don't understand.
You said you refer out, and then they tell your client to stop lifting. Not to cut you off, but like
that I've had that happen a lot.
Grinds my gears so much,
And
I would have clients that would come to me and they'd be like, we have to do my PT exercises first. And I'd be like, okay, and then
so it's a tough one, because I don't want to step outside my scope and put myself in a position where I'm liable for, because like physios are important. They're trained on stuff that we're not, and they're especially important in scenarios where there could be red flags and sinister things that only they would be trained on picking up on. But the problem is that you want to like give them that legitimacy, but at the same time, not have somebody going to someone who's a complete quack job who just happens to have a certain certificate or whatever, and you could have actually guided them through the injury process way better with just a basic understanding of load and stress and adaptation.
Yep, exactly. And I've run into situations like that many times. And, you know, there's been a handful of times where people trusted me to not do like a rehab, you know, but it's like my knee hurts. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't like super alarming. It's probably a minor issue that can resolve itself within a few weeks if we just kind of adjust this and that. And, you know, if it hurts to do this, we can alter it in this way. And we'll just keep training and it should get better on its own. And if it doesn't, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah.
And like, for me, I just cross my fingers and hope we never get to that point. I hope that I kind of work the magic enough where, you know, I like just control, because like, that's the only thing we can really control, you know, like is stress to the body. And it's like, if we can't control other factors, or we shouldn't even be necessarily looking into other factors, like let's just manage the loads as best we can. Let's keep them training, keep them moving. And if it resolves itself within a few weeks and they don't have to go see somebody that's going to give them a false diagnosis and tell them they have to stop lifting or that they need surgery, or order an MRI and go down that rabbit hole. It's like, that's great. But, you know, it is tough when you do actually have to refer out to somebody, and then that's what happens.
Especially if you've got no idea, you know, who they are.
I mean, I'm fortunate enough with my company Collaborative Strength that Sophia is a doctor of physical therapy, my better half and business partner, and she does do rehab consults through
that's perfect,
like online rehab consults. So even if like I have a lifter that, you know, hurts themselves and, you know, it's like the red flags are starting to pop up, I can easily have them, you know, be evaluated by Sophia and have a conversation, and then it's easy because we can just kind of, Sophia and I just converse about, you know, how to adjust the programming and, you know, what exercises to potentially add or stuff like that. So that's really helpful. But yeah, like if you're in an area and you don't have anybody that's like an evidence-based practitioner and you just have to send someone to, it's tough.
Terrible.
It's super tough. I know, because I've been in that situation before too. And I've even been in that situation where like the good physio is the evidence-based physio is like 20 minutes away and they won't go because their shitty physio is 10 minutes away.
Yeah. Or cheaper.
I've literally been in that situation, and it's tough because the client's super frustrated with their issue. And I'm like, listen, if you stop going to, I don't say it like that, but it's like, I really try to highlight how like much like better, I guess, that the person that but I don't want to make it seem like, oh, they're better because I'm referring them. It's like, and it's hard to convey the message of like, well, they're evidence-based, you know, to your client who's a engineer or something, you know, or when they don't live in the same world, so they don't understand it. It's so frustrating, you know, and it's like, well, no, they just go to and then they come back and they're doing like postural neck chin tucks. Oh my God, we're getting nowhere.
And then you got to figure out, like,
we go.
how can I like maybe put this into like a warm up or in between sets, and what's the minimum amount I can do just to like appease this person, you know? But
I've done that. I've done that a ton, and it is what it is, you know. Like sometimes you do that. You do have to do the silly bullshit sometimes just to appease. It's like always have to meet the person where they're at, and especially how much of like an authority figure, like how do they perceive you? You know, like do they have full trust in you that everything that you say they're going to just listen to? I don't even know if that's a good thing.
You know, you want them to develop some autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, it is tough when you have, you know, like you know how many times I've been told, well, not that many times, but like, you're not my doctor, you know, and it's like, yeah, you're right, I'm not. So that's fine if you want to. That's fine.
Yeah, you can tell by the tone sometimes if someone's going to be convinced.
I have to shut up at that point.
Yeah.
You know? All right.
It's interesting though. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because a lot of this issue stems from the fact that, you know, there's just not maybe a high enough barrier of entry or standard of education in some things, in some of the like professions related to the health and fitness field. And I was watching a video there a while ago that Zach Talander put up about you know, the whole Liver King thing. And now actually this video was from back in December, I think, but it was an interesting one where I'm sure you've come across this before with your memes. It's a common criticism that I've gotten before as well, and I've kind of dwelt on it and not been so sure sometimes what my thoughts are. This whole idea of like, you should be more focused on you yourself doing a good job as opposed to calling people out. And, in the video, Zach was talking about like, well, we've got no idea if like, say, Liver King is on steroids, for example. And like, is it really is it that bad a thing if like he's just getting people into doing some exercise and stuff like that? And I kind of think that like sometimes we forget that it's easy for you and me or anybody who's been in training for a while to be able to detect that, something is kind of bullshit, or if somebody just says something that like you're pretty clearly sure isn't going to work, it's kind of easy to just say, well, yeah, no, I don't know, maybe like ethically if it's right or wrong. But if you're somebody who's just getting into this stuff, you possibly have no way of knowing who is qualified and who isn't qualified. And I know the only way that I figured out that, say, some of the nutrition stuff I was doing was completely off the wall and possibly even dangerous and giving me like a borderline eating disorder, was the only way I found out that was bad was because of people like, Lane Norton, a guy who gets loads of flack for, being really aggressive in his delivery and going after people and naming names. And I don't know, I'd be interested to get your perspective about that, because with the meme thing, a lot of the time, the stuff that gets the biggest return on investment is stuff where you deliberately address people like, say, Squat University or Joel Seedman or whoever. So what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like I kind of struggle with this myself as well, because it goes back to your previous point about like about just these people like coming in and they, someone like Liver King just getting somebody like introduced to movement and physical activity, is that, or even like just any of these guys that like they kind of lean more towards the kinesiopathic model, but they do promote movement. Is that a good thing by getting more people moving and getting more people active? Yes, I think so. But I don't love the idea of like people getting into exercise and then developing all these like maladaptive beliefs and self-limiting beliefs about what they could potentially do or what their body's capable of. In terms of like the level of entry thing, I don't know, like it's funny because like you use Squat U and it's like Seedman as an example, right? It's like Seedman has a PhD.
Yeah.
And Squat U has a doctor of physical therapy. So it's hard to say like, yes, we like people should have X level of education to come into this field.
Yeah.
Which I also think is kind of a barrier in itself, because I feel like
you could be a great coach who just can't afford to go to college.
Yeah. Like I feel like what's his name? I can't remember his name. Willpower Weightlifting though is his handle. Are you familiar with him? I think he's
Willpower
somewhere in your part of the world. I forget it's like, let me look him up. But to my knowledge, he no educational background, and he's a fucking amazing weightlifting coach.
Right.
Let me see here. Willpower Weightlifting. He doesn't have his own name here. Doesn't even. It's in Forge Lane, Pontypool. Where the fuck is that?
Oh, that's definitely Wales.
Oh, okay. I guess I was a little wrong on that geographically.
He's closer to me than you are, anyway.
Well, yeah, that's fair. But guys like him, like I think someone like Jacob Sipkin. Are you familiar with him? He's a CrossFit coach.
Yeah, I've heard that name before. I haven't really heard any of his stuff, but I know the name.
And like these guys didn't get into it through academia, and they're amazing coaches. So it's like, it's really tough, like the whole level of entry thing. Like, it's I don't know. I'm not sure, like, who am I to even weigh in on that? In terms of like the memes, and calling people out like deliberately, like saying names, saying, hey, like this was your claim.
Yeah.
Like, where's the evidence for this? Or like, I really don't think that there's any problem with that.
Yeah.
If I'm being perfectly honest. Because like, I think that we should all be held accountable as coaches, clinicians, professionals within this field somehow.
Yeah.
And I've heard people make the argument that people don't do this in other fields. I don't even know if that's true or not, but it seems like kind of bullshit,
Well, I would also counter that with like, maybe they don't need to, I mean, like if you take a field like say engineering or something like that, I mean, fitness is weird because sports science is a soft science. Like, yes, there's underlying physics and biology and stuff like that, but I mean, there's a lot of ways that people can interpret different studies, and I just think that like it's
there's a lot of theory.
Yeah, there's and like, I mean, I have my own way of doing things, and I wanted to talk to you about this the whole like conjugate method things. We've had like similar training styles in the past, but I don't see any issue with somebody interpreting an overall kind of like principle of training differently, like, I mean,
no.
I don't really care too much about that. It's when somebody is doing something that's like very clearly not in line with any kind of decent evidence or even like theoretical mechanism, and especially if that's paired with something that's probably going to be harmful for somebody or a harmful narrative. I just feel like, especially when you consider that most of the people who do that are like the big dogs in the industry who are profiting off that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like we don't really need to be defending these people and giving them an extra out to make it easier for them to profit from that. Like, it's really no harm in offering a different perspective that people might see and find out about the evidence-based part of fitness.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. To go back to like in terms of like calling people out though, like I think if like it, I had like you said, like I have more of a problem with you making some wild claim that's not in line with like any evidence, right? Yeah. And it's like, I think I don't want to say like it's our duty, but like we should be holding someone like that. Like, you should challenge the exact claim. And if you want to use that person's name and, maybe provide some counter evidence and just kind of bring awareness to like, hey, this idea is not necessarily backed by like any data. And this is like, this is what we have that, that's like relevant to this topic at all. And it's contradictory to what is being said here. And it's like, I don't know, I think that that stuff's important for people to see, like from the outside looking in.
Yeah. I've also noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this as well, that like if you just address the general idea, people will seemingly get what you're saying, but then like completely disregard it when someone who's charismatic enough comes along and starts selling them that thing. So like I've had it before where like there's people who follow my page who I've seen before who will like comment under memes that I make where I'm making fun of like how ridiculous it is that like, people believe you have to get manual therapy if you're in pain, or people who believe that you have to address asymmetries and blah, 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 blah. Like they'll comment and like on stuff and message me. And then I'll look at their page and they're like, FMS certified and like they're following everything that Squat U puts up. And I'm like, I don't think you actually understand the concept that I'm talking about here.
There's like a huge dissonance between like,
like people really struggle to actually apply that then to a person who's slapped a product or a label on this and like, rebranded it as something else,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's just like, there's so many different ideas and different theories and different methods of training and rehab and just all of the different methodologies out there, like different ideas. Like, it just creates a clusterfuck of confusion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's why I sometimes struggle to create content. Like I said earlier, like, am I just throwing buckets of water into the ocean? Am I adding value amongst, what the other coaches are posting, or am I just adding more confusion for the average lifter who is kind of my target audience anyways?
Yeah.
It's like, I want to put out this content. It's educational. I'm thinking it'll help someone, but how is it being interpreted? Right. And like, how is it being interpreted the way that I want it to be? And like, or is it just kind of confusing people because the way I'm putting it out there, it's tough because like, you have these biases that like, and you could just sit there and say like, yeah, I know that I have this bias or that bias, but like, you're not consciously aware of these things, like while you're typing a caption.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be a bias.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be a bias. Exactly. So it's just, I don't know. It's just really tough. Like I go back and forth a lot, and I try to be as like nuanced as possible, and I try to make things as practical as possible and not confusing. But you know, I don't know if it actually is being received that way or not, which is tough. You know.
So I don't know. Are you under time pressure at all?
Nope.
Okay, because I wanted to get through some of these topics, and I wanted to.
Yeah, I know. We've
talked about. I
could ramble forever, dude.
No, same. But that's why I do a podcast. But you know, I actually wanted to talk about training. You know, and like obviously what you do with your business and everything. We both. I've seen you post memes about it before. I posted memes about it before, like the West Side Barbell stuff and the conjugate stuff. I'd like to get your perspective on that and what your experience with it was, because we both kind of, I wouldn't say I really do powerlifting, but I pretty much train for 1 rep maxes. I just don't do meets. I just train for 1RMs and the big lifts. But, you know, I really felt like I got led astray for kind of the first 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years of when I first started. I really wanted to focus on strength training, because I found that most of the powerlifting centric content at that time, which would have been around maybe 2012, 2013, that was online on YouTube and just websites, was stuff like, say, Elite FTS or West Side Barbell and stuff like that. It was all about box squats and wide stances and bands and chains and stuff like that. And
love that stuff.
What'd you say?
I love that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, like, when you're into lifting weights and, you know, this method comes along that says you can just max out every single week and just change the exercises. And, you know, most people who get into lifting love the idea of lots of novelty and variety. So it kind of brought all that to the table. But my perspective was that I got really good at all the stuff that I was doing, which was everything except what I actually wanted to get better at. And then it took a while for me to realize that. But how did you get, you know, sucked into that, and what was your perspective coming out of it?
So this kind of all, I won't drag this out, but it all kind of goes back to when I started powerlifting, and we were doing the Chico stuff, and
which is very different to Westside.
Very different. So that was great. You know, I had gotten up to like a 475 squat. From that day, I got stapled with 245. So that's 215 kilos. So I went from 110 to 215 in like a year.
Wow.
I got injured shortly after that, which is probably why. Way too much too soon.
Big load jump.
Big time. But we were doing the Chico stuff, and I was seeing, you know, repeatable progress over time, linear progress, and I was new to it, so that's kind of factors into. But then we started to kind of drift away from the Chico stuff, because like in Russia, that works really well when you're very disciplined and you've been doing it since you were 6 years old or whatever. But when you're taking, you know, 30-year-olds who aren't athletic, and you're only putting them through this, like, you know, high volume, average relative intensity of like 75%, 80% tops, you know, when we would actually test 1RMs, it just never went well. Like, people were scared, like you could see the nervousness, the technique would just fall apart. So it was like, I think, you know, he recognized, okay, we got to start throwing some heavier stuff in here somehow, right? So then we started to shift away, and we started doing more like, it was never like singles. It was more so like we would do like 3, 4, 5 RMs, stuff like that. And then it was like, it slowly started to transition more into like, I don't want to say it's like a West Side program, but it was like my former coach's like own recreation of like West Side principles and like Chico principles. And like, you know, he's the one who introduced me to like dynamic systems theory, which is like is super interesting. And like so like the way he applied all it was like a big combination of like these conjugate principles and like basic strength training principles and like stuff from dynamic systems theory and like a constraints-led approach. So I was like, this makes a ton of sense.
Acquisition stuff.
Yeah. So it's like when you frame West Side under like actual like sound scientific practices, it makes a lot better sense. You know what I mean? If you think of the variations as constraints within dynamic systems theory, and that will help you self-organize to a more efficient 1RM, you're like, whoa, maybe this is how this stuff works. And it's just not for the reasons that Louis thinks.
Yeah.
Type of thing. You know what I mean?
I've heard that a lot.
So I think that's what really, that's what drew me. You know what I mean? Was like, wow, this is like, I read, like Yan Chow and Keith David's work on constraints-led approach and, dynamic, the dynamics of skill acquisition. And
Franz Bosch,
I love that. Yeah, Franz, like I love that stuff. So it all made a lot of sense. You know what I mean? I was like, but through actually doing it, right, it was like what you would experience. Like I was doing all these things and I just started to notice that I was getting only better at these things and not what actually mattered, which was my comp squat.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like it just kind of went to one extreme where it was like, I would only get a shot at a comp squat. We would do a deload every 4th week and it was comp lifts, but it was like doubles at 80%. So it was never anything intense. It was like more of a recovery thing. And then it was like, you would sequence all these particular variations in a way that it's supposed to like, you attack this joint angle and this joint angle and sequence it in a way that like when you get back to your free bar squat, you should just be able to PR it. And like all these positions are going to be stronger. Right. And it's like, but every time I would do that, I would literally get folded over. And it would just like never go well. I remember my last meet prep with my former coach. So like, I remember doing a box squat, like a max effort box squat, like 3 or 4 weeks out. And I squatted, what would it be in kilos? Like 207.5 kilos to a box.
The box.
Right. For a 1 RM.
Like competition depth?
To competition depth. Yeah. I would always squat to a low box. I never squatted to a high box because like it just didn't make sense to me. But,
with all the free
but
stuff
like the thing about the box squat is like you can lean, like you don't have to, like you have the box as like this safety net almost, and that you can kind of bounce off the box and you can, right. And it's like, like when two bodies meet, right, like that is basic physics. So it's like, okay, sure. Like when I bounce off the box, I'm going to create a ton of force, which is going to shoot me a little more off the box and allow me to create a little more force to drive through the sticking point. Cool. Right.
Yeah.
But when I took a free squat 2 weeks later to act like as an actual test for the meet, I squatted 197 kilos.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So it was literally 10 kilos less.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it was like a max effort. It's like RP 10. And I was like fucking pissed, And that was kind of the
didn't use the right variations.
That was kind of the turning point for me though. Like, I was like, okay, like this, I still did it for like a few months after that. Cause like, I don't know. I was kind of struggling going back and forth with like, is it me? Am I doing like literally like I would have like philosophical discussions with myself. Like, am I making the wrong decisions week after week? Am I doing the program? Maybe I'm not asking the right question. Maybe it's me. Like I just came up with all these reasons why I wasn't getting stronger as if it was my fault. And it was, I don't know, like I just started to see the light and I got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore, and I totally switched my training up.
Like I used to be bought into it in a similar way that you were talking about with like the whole idea of constraints-led model and how, or even the whole idea of like addressing weak points and stuff like that. But the more that
I think there's like some truth to that, like the weak points, like
I think certainly like
interesting. Like I go back and forth with that, right? Like
I'm not sure like how I feel about
I'm not fully sold on like that you have weak points, but like I feel like there are always things that we can work on to improve the ultimate goal. You know what I mean? Like something can be done in the background.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
but the way I think about it is that, if like that, all of that stuff was necessary to get your squat to go up, like that really, it's quite like a negative outlook on the adaptive abilities of the human body. Like, I mean, we wouldn't have made it very far as a human race if in order to get better at hunting animals, we have to do everything else except hunting animals and all the things that are going to help that movement pattern. And like, it just like, it doesn't make sense from like even a theoretical point of view, given that we don't really have like the research anyway to show that you know, working all of those like complicated things would make your strength go up more. It doesn't make sense even theoretically that like your body would need that much complexity, because like our adaptations are always specific to the task we're doing. Obviously you get a point of diminished returns eventually, and you know, there's times where you have to work on other stuff like increasing your muscle mass to get stronger, or you know, maybe you need to improve your technique and things like that. But you know, for anybody listening to this who's just starting off, the idea that they would need to do anything other than the squat to get better at the squat and get up to say like the level you're at, like I don't know what you said you got to after the first year or whatever, but like I was doing stuff that was so far advanced beyond what I needed that like it just was such a waste of time, and I was getting good at stuff that didn't matter.
And it's funny because like when I really put it into perspective for myself, like I've only been powerlifting, actually lifting weights, like following a program consistently for like 4 years.
Right. Those are some good numbers.
Before that, I didn't powerlift and I didn't follow a program, and I did all kinds of functional stuff. And it was always like random. I never ran programs. I didn't do 5-3-1. I didn't do starting strength. I just didn't do that stuff. I watched kettlebell dudes, and I would do like I literally did a kettlebell flow competition in like 2017. I won a kettlebell. Like I was like so deep into that stuff. I loved it. But then when I started to get into actual strength training, right, it was only 2018. So I'm really not that advanced.
Right.
I think maybe I have somewhat good genetics for getting started when I did, and being at such a low point and being able to bring myself up so quickly. I think maybe I have good genetics. I kind of blame that on. Not that I'm like elite in any way, but like I got really strong really quickly by following the program, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just a bit of a genetic outlier. I'm already 36, so I'm probably, you know, I'm like, I didn't start till I was 32, and now I'm 36, and it's like I'm not 20, so I'm not gonna like probably never squat 700 pounds, but I might squat 6. You know. Anyways,
but so sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I always go off on tangents.
No. I just wanted to carry on from what you were saying there about like you realized that, and then when you started departing, how did you go about departing from that training method? Like where did you look for as resources to start changing things up then?
So at that point, I had already started collaborative strength, and I had been coaching actual powerlifters for probably about a year at that point. And the way that I was programming for them and coaching them was like, I started out doing the same things that I was doing, like I would make people squat in flats and do wide stance and squat to boxes. And I literally lost a couple clients over that. And then I started to realize that like, okay, like I for some reason convinced myself that I was more advanced than I am. And I was like, okay, you know, I built a good base with the Shiko stuff. I had gotten really strong, but now maybe this is an appropriate time to like increase rate of force development, make myself more explosive, and I don't know, train this wide array of variation and get strong in all these different positions. And maybe that'll be helpful in the long run, right? And I kind of convinced myself of these things, but I was like, the people that I'm coaching don't need this stuff. So I started to just do more basic, and I would add like little things here and there, like, you know, like if you're moving a little slowly, like you're just timid in the squat, like sure, squat with bands, like light bands, nothing heavy. But like I remember my lifter Louise, he was like, he had squatted like what in kilos, maybe like 185 kilos, right? At this point. But he would go like super slow into the bottom, and he was just like this, you know, he would just move super slowly. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna give him squat with bands. I remember he's like, he almost got he texted me and he was like, why is 85 kilos so hard for like one rep? And I was like, because you move too slow, man. You know, like there is something to like being a little more like explosive.
I think that it's easy to discount the psychological aspect of lifting.
Well, I think that's what it ties into too. It's like I don't think it's necessarily like you're developing like these physiological qualities, which you may be, right? We do have all these theories behind, different muscle fiber types and different interventions playing into different types of like the strength velocity, the force velocity curve, and all that types of speed, strength, and all that type of stuff. Like I get that exists, and those theories exist, and you are probably maybe developing those physical qualities, but I think the psychological aspect plays a lot more into it.
Definitely.
You move slow because you're, timid, you're fearful, like you think you need to do this certain technique. And then when you just like, you start to just like really just go for it and just like do your squat really fast, and like you drive through the sticking point so much faster, and you're like, you throw 10 kilos on your squat that day. You're like, holy shit, but then after that, you don't really need to train that. Like you kind of, now you have this confidence, and now you have this ability, and now we can just kind of move the bar a little faster without the accommodating resistance.
And was that, and can I ask, is that an online client?
That's an online client.
Yeah.
I actually I don't work with anybody in person.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm split between in person and online, and a lot of the stuff that I would discount, or disregard in terms of like, I don't think that people need to do pause squats. Like a lot of people like, go for a 1 rep max squat and they miss it out of the bottom, and they're like, oh, I need to do pause squats. And I'm like, no, that's just where the squat is the fucking hardest every time. So you probably have too much weight on the bar. But I have used pause squats with online clients because, when you get like an online client, it might not happen so much because you work with powerlifters and they have a better idea of depth and stuff. But a really common issue I find when I get somebody for the first time and they're not really used to doing an exercise like the squat is they've got no sense of depth. And if they don't have a box in the gym, I'll get them to do something like a pause squat because I'm not there in person on each rep to say, go lower, go lower, go lower. Whereas I can say, you're going to squat down as low as you can, and you're going to hold the bottom position for a full 2 seconds and then drive up. And then after a few sessions of doing that, when they've learned what depth is, I can take it away the same way you took the bands away once the guy learned how to be explosive and aggressive. So,
yeah, exactly. Like I think that there's, I think that the use of variation is warranted within certain contexts like that, right?
Yeah, I see it as more of like a teaching tool most of the time.
Absolutely, right? And it's not necessarily something that needs to be trained frequently, or maybe even ever again, because if they're doing the thing that, because you employ the intervention because they're not doing what you want them to do. Yeah. Right. But once they're doing what you want them to do, right? Like in the case of my guy, he's being more aggressive, right? I don't really need him to do the bands anymore. You know? He could just train the regular free squat more aggressively. Yeah. And it's like the same with your client. Like, once they get the idea of where the depth is, then you just train the regular squat. Yeah.
Keep things as simple as you can until you don't need to.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like I bought into the complexity at one point too, because I love the theory and I'm like passionate about training and like all that stuff is super cool, but like it literally forces you to not just be simple. It's like it's the opposite of the KISS principle. And
I've found that sometimes it can distract from keeping the big things in perspective, like pushing hard in your training and focusing on your recovery and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's low-hanging fruit that needs to be, grabbed first before we start to venture out into like all these extra things like bands or whatever.
Absolutely.
Movement variation, whatever.
So coming towards the end here, there's a couple of things I always like to ask each guest at the end. I think they're good questions to kind of get a summary of like important things that people have learned. And the first one I wanted to ask you is, what would be the biggest thing that you've changed your mind on recently? It could be in like the previous few months, it could have been a year or 2 years ago, but like what was like a really big thing that you kind of clung to that maybe immediately changed or very slightly over time you eventually did a 180 on?
I was trying to think of a good answer for this question, to be honest. And I just couldn't really come up with one, only because I've changed my mind. Like I'm going through a bit of a transition period with like my own training, because with all the
same. I did 6 days a week of benching heavy this week, which is something I usually wouldn't recommend for people, and it's gone really well. I've lifted more weight every time. But sorry, go on.
No, that's awesome. But no, so like I still kind of held on to some of those. I don't know. I understand, like, it's tough for me to just say like conjugate and like think of it in the terms of like bands and chains, because I know that's not what it actually means, but it's like, it's easy for people to understand what I mean when like, they know what they just like conjugate
nice
for term. People is like synonymous with bands and chains and like these variations and stuff. So it's like, when I stopped doing that to like an extreme, I still kept a lot of like the principles in, I guess. Like I kept using bands, I kept using boxes. And I can't say whether or not like that's the way that I used it was more helpful or not. But like even after my like last meet, I've really transitioned away from a lot of that stuff. I really don't use like boxes in my training anymore. I've been thinking about maybe doing some bench with chains, but like I've been doing just regular. Like I vary grip sometimes, I think is helpful. But like for the most part, I've just been doing like one day I'll do conventional, one day I'll do sumo. Like one day I'll do high bar, one day I'll do low bar. And like it's no crazy wild variation. And it's I don't know, like I feel like I don't want to say for certain like that I've changed my mind that this is now gonna be my like style and this is the way to go. And but like I don't know, like I've had a big shift in the way I think a lot about like the accommodating resistance and like box squats. And because I've written articles like on the box squat, right, where it's like I was a full advocate for it. Like this is a great training exercise for powerlifting. Like I was just fully behind it, and like now I just don't really feel that way anymore, and it's like I feel like a lot of these conjugate principles, I guess, or West Side principles are just kind of like, I don't know, losing their luster, I guess I could say. Because I was bought into them, maybe not in the way that like Louis explained them, but I was definitely bought into them in the way that like they were explained through like the framework of dynamic systems and all this other stuff. So it's like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm going through a transition right now, and I've changed my mind a lot on those like training type of those aspects of training.
I find that the way that I always try to guard myself now from like getting suckered into something again that I would regress later on is I always try to rationalize it with like what has actually worked in practice for me, and also like what the evidence says as well. And because I have like a pretty, I mean, the evidence I think is probably secondary to like the principles of training. But like if something lines up really well, even with all those like the principles of training and there's some science to it, but I've already tried it and it just doesn't work for me, then I don't want to go down that road. And because West Side and conjugate has worked for some people, and you can make an argument for how it fits into, there's some studies on bands and chains, and there's the principles of training can be,
applied
in all sorts of different ways. But the reality is I just fucking tried it for like 2 years and it just didn't work. And a more simple way works. And I think as long as you keep things grounded in like what you've actually tried and seen work with yourself and people you coach, you won't get steered too far wrong. And then the last thing sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, at this point, like I'm just like basically sticking to the principle of keep it simple, like
definitely.
What does the evidence say? Like, what does it not say? And like, don't let yourself fall into this trap of like twisting data to fit your own narrative. You know what I mean? Like, because like every study I've looked at on bands and chains shows that it improves rate of force development. So like I could do enough mental gymnastics to where rate of force development improves maximal strength to, like, it's like the sequence of mechanisms, right? It's like, I can come up with a logical like theory on why improving rate of force development will later potentiate maximal strength, but we don't have the data to make that bold of a claim. You know what I mean? Like, sure, it maybe makes sense, but we just don't have the applied data that this produces these results. We just don't. But so I just try to like that's like my mantra, you know, and I just try to remember those things and try to not fall into those traps again, you know?
Yeah. And then last thing I wanted to ask you is, what would be a piece of advice you'd give to your younger self starting off in training?
That's a good question too. I'd probably tell my younger self to just be more open to uncertainty and to embrace uncertainty. It took me a while to really wrap my head around what that actually means. And, you know, like I always had like this idea that there were some concrete answers out there for how things should be done.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the more experience I gain, like the more research I read, I just start to realize that like, we really don't know as much as some people like to, you know, put on the facade that they do. And like, we just need to come to grips that like the things that we do might or might not work. And like, you just need to roll with you just kind of need to ride the wave, you know, and like adjust and be flexible and adaptable to your environment, and just understand that like, it's just, we can't predict the future, you know. You just, like I said, like be flexible and adaptable, embrace the uncertainty, and just that's it, you know.
And I think when you take that mindset, it's easier to change the way that you do things then, you know, when new evidence comes along and you haven't totally shaped your identity around a certain way of doing things. You're not like you weren't like the CrossFit guy for 3 years and then the West Side guy for 3 years and then the whatever the new thing is right now, squat you guy. And you know, every time you have to keep on breaking down your identity and starting over again, it's less likely you're going to do it.
Yep. Because I feel like I did that exact thing, you know, like I remember when I was in the FMS stuff, and people called me the mobility guy at the gym, you know, because I'd have all these, you know, the new fun mobility drills to do. And that was just, you know, that was my identity, you know, and I just continued to reaffirm that and, you know, like just kind of solidify it in my mind and solidify it to everybody else by doing the practices that I did. And it was tough to strip myself of that, you know, and it was like, and then I feel, you know, it's like, I feel like it's easy to fall into that trap of creating some identity around a certain method or whatever. And then like, it's tough because then it's like the backfire effect when you get challenged, you know, it's, you just double down on what you think to be true or what you believe. And it's hard to really, it's hard to break that mindset. It's hard to change someone's perspective, you know, in that type of situation. So,
no, admirable answer. And I'd probably say the same thing as well. Try to be more open to uncertainty and maybe, you know, knowing that stuff works, but not knowing why it works and stuff like that.
That's a very helpful one. That was like huge for me. It was like, okay, like just because the thing works, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know, if there's no evidence behind it, we don't have to stop using it type of thing. You know, it's like maybe someone likes these certain core exercises, right? But the narrative used to be like, oh, we're going to increase your core stability to prevent later, you know, future injury type of thing, or prevent back pain, right? But now it's like, well, we're just doing this exercise because you like it and it's movement, you know, type of thing.
But I had that today actually with I was training my dad today, and he's been getting a little bit of back pain, and you know, obviously the research shows that probably any kind of movement is going to be equally good, but you know, his belief is that, you know, stretching feels nice and that it's something that will help him. And you know, there was no bad narrative attached to it, so I just gave him a stretch to do, just like a upward dog and a downward dog. And that was better than me just saying that, I don't know, something about regression to the mean or natural history or something like that.
You start to learn quickly that nobody gives a shit about that.
Nobody gives a shit, except for context like this.
Like, just give them the stretch. It'll make them feel better. As long as you're not like adding to the harmful narrative, you know, it's like, even if they have this idea that might not be super helpful, but you know that you're not going to be able to change it. It's like, as long as you don't add to it, just let them do the stretch. You know what I mean?
Greg Lehman has a great thing on that, where he says that, like, you know, not every idea needs to be challenged or is worth challenging, you know. It's just, if it's not,
I got to the point because I used to challenge, like there was a point in time where like I was learning all this new stuff and it was like constant challenge and like constant contention with my clients. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like not necessarily in a bad way, but it was like I quickly recognized like just shut up and just
if they cared as much about this stuff as we do, we wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, exactly. Or they would be in the field as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's great.
They just want to move. They just want to feel better and move around. That's it. You know?
Yeah, which is perfectly fine. So listen, thank you very much for coming on to the pod.
Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would assume most people who are listening know your meme page at Certified Personnel
Probably.
Truths. What's the story behind the name for that actually?
So it's because I wanted to play on CPT, so like Certified Personal Trainer.
Okay.
Yeah, and then like I kind of thought like, well, certified, and then like I'm like technically like personnel, right?
Yeah.
Like as a kind of a joke. And then like the truths behind like being certified and being a personnel like in this field, like it, I don't know, just to play on CPT. That was really all.
And I always I always imagine your little Dr. Evil character like with the fingers like saying that like truths.
Yeah. Exactly. It's funny because that was one of my first memes that I made too. It was like something with his quotation.
Yeah.
I just thought of it. I don't even, it's funny because like I can't even remember what the profile picture originally was because it wasn't the Dr. Evil until I made it the meme. And I was like, somehow this is just so like apropos. Like I have to, it's just so fitting. I have to.
Yeah, it does fit the whole tone of your profile somehow. I can't really put my finger on it, but it does.
Exactly. It just works. You know, it just makes sense. Like the memes, like we were talking about earlier, you know, it's tough to put language to it, but it just makes sense.
Yeah. Like I said, you don't have to know why it works. It just works. So that's your meme page.
Who cares if it's horse piss? It works.
Exactly. That's your meme page. And then your business's collaborative strength. Is that Ask Collaborative Strength?
It's just at Collaborative Strength. And my personal account is at Mark_Collaborative Strength.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, pleasure having you on, man. And I'm looking forward to whatever new memes you've got cooking up.
Same. Tag me. I'll share them. We'll have some fun.
All right. Thanks, Mel.